I am a sick alpha and I only have feelings for alphas. To be precise, I only have feelings for my younger brother David. I sneaked into his room like a thief, took out his shirt, and greedily sniffed the remaining pheromones on it. I climbed onto his bed again and pretended to fall asleep in his arms. Have a good night. When I woke up, I found that David had already returned and was pressing me down, with his canine teeth gently rubbing the back of my neck. Brother, do you want my pheromones? Why didn't you just say it earlier? David hasn't been home for 7 days. So long that even the housekeeper mentioned it to me. David's birthday is coming up. What should we do this time? In fact, there are still 28 days until his 22nd birthday. I took a sip of my wine, which was so bitter that it made me upset. Same as usual. It's just inviting some bad friends, isn't that what David did? He has been carefree and unruly since he was young, relying on his status as a top alpha to be fearless. He has caused me a lot of trouble, and the people who come to my house and ask me to make decisions for them can line up outside the community. The same thing happened 7 days ago. A weak Omega actually went to the company and tearfully accused David of forcing him. I was so angry that I pointed at David's nose and yelled, "Don't bully others just because you have a few bucks and your pheromones, okay? I have a lot of things to do in my company. You've grown up, don't act like a kid and need me to clean up your mess every day." How did David respond? Oh, he raised his eyebrows and said without hesitation, "Break pheromones? Are you sure?" One sentence made me lose my temper. David's pheromones smell like the overbearing and spicy tequila, and he is like a powder keg that can explode at any time. Others say that our family is very blessed. Both of our sons are top alphas and our family will surely reach new heights. I am not. Whose alpha is lemon flavored? So David always uses this to put one foot above me. Alphas are naturally incompatible with each other. Fortunately, thanks to my status as his elder brother, I can still be on par with him in terms of momentum. Finally, they parted unhappily, and he left behind a sentence. "If you want me to come back, you have to ask me to do it yourself." He left for 7 days and we haven't seen each other for 7 days. But every morning, the secretary would report David's movements to me on time. I know he was racing with others again, risking his life to break the record on the winding mountain road, and everyone called him Big Brother. I pondered over this title again and realized that he had indeed forgotten his brother. What a heartless person. But his fingers couldn't help but touch the photo. David's body was flying, and his rebellious face was full of madness. It coincides with the figure in my dreams every night. I closed my eyes and sighed. Perhaps I was distracted by the housekeeper's words, and when I came to my senses, I found myself in David's room. David doesn't let anyone into his room, so it's far from tidy. The clothes were spread out casually on the bed, and when you looked around you could see that there were even some close-fitting clothes. I was stunned for a moment, my face turned red, and I looked away. Reason tells me that I should leave here immediately. But my feet felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The smell of tequila in the air was very faint, and it slipped past me intermittently. But it easily brings out another lemon scent. It was only when the smell of lemon in the air completely overwhelmed the smell of tequila that I realized what had happened. That's right, I'm a sick alpha. I have no interest in omegas, I only have feelings for alphas. To be precise, I only have feelings for David. When David was 16, he skipped school and I made him kneel down as punishment. He refused to accept the punishment and released pheromones to compete with me. He wasn't fully developed at that time, so I wouldn't fall behind. But soon, I began to feel something strange. It's not the desire to win among the same kind, but an urge to get close to him, to be close to him, to bite him, to leave my scent on him. I was startled and immediately realized something was wrong. I quickly scolded him and left, making the excuse that I had something to do. Later, I looked up a lot of information and saw a statement that incomplete alphas are attracted to their own kind. Then I realized that I was sick. I've looked for omega and beta, but I don't feel anything. I didn't give up and started looking for alphas, but I almost got into a fight with them. The alpha I hired apologized repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I lost control of myself for a moment." He had a weird look on his face, probably wondering why a weird alpha like me would spend money to find an alpha to play with pheromones. I sank into the sofa, staring at the floor. I knew I was done. I want a brother of my own. From that day on, I started to keep my distance from David. It was okay at the beginning, as long as there was no physical contact, I could control it. I am an adult alpha, and I know how to control my pheromones. No way. David has a quirk when taking a shower. The whole bathroom is filled with the smell of pheromones. It was so thick that I could feel it in the room next to his, hot and wet and sticky. I rushed to his room angrily and yelled at his bathroom door, "Don't wholesale pheromones cost money? There are outsiders in the house, keep them for me." David showed his head full of white bubbles and blinked innocently, "Brother, but they are all betas." The next second, he suddenly realized, "Oh, the company has a lot of troubles recently? Then I won't provoke you, so don't be angry." He drew back and really took it. I took a deep breath, then walked back to my room and into the bathroom. Later, David said I was stingy with a sullen face. "Brother, I have collected them all. Why did you release such a strong pheromone?" Fortunately, I controlled it, otherwise what would happen if we fought? He thought I was competing with him. I looked at his innocent eyes and wished I could tear him apart and swallow him. But now, I sniffed hard again, trying to capture the scent that belonged to David, but the effect was ineffective. It took me 7 days to walk without a conscience. If it wasn't top-notch, it would have evaporated long ago. I felt a surge of anger in my heart. The feet that were originally planning to retreat changed their route and walked firmly towards his cloakroom. He looked around and his eyes were fixed on a white shirt. I reached out and quickly grabbed it, like a thief. Leave with a sense of righteousness. As soon as my hand touched the door handle, I suddenly didn't want to leave. I had already been thinking about another place. The string called reason had long been broken. I just followed my heart and lay on David's bed openly. The bedding was the same, but David's pillow did seem more comfortable. Well, the quilt is warmer too. Well, the clothes smell better too. I clutched David's white shirt tightly and buried my head in the collar. Everything David uses retains pheromones to show possession, which makes it convenient for me. Even a little bit is good. I closed my eyes contentedly and fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, 16-year-old David was crying in front of my closed door. "Brother, please don't ignore me. I was wrong. I will never skip school again. Some people say that you won't care about me after you get married. That's why I don't want you to go on a date. Please forgive me. Brother, open the door and look at me. I was really wrong." Yes, I was preparing to go on a blind date that day, and I was scared to death when I heard that he had skipped school and disappeared. In the end, everyone was fine, but the one who was in trouble was me, who felt something was wrong for the first time. I hid in the room. But David couldn't control his pheromones when he was crying, and they ran rampant. That was the first time, and the desire almost crushed me. I slept very soundly. It was rare that I didn't suffer from insomnia. When I opened my eyes, it was just daybreak, and the sunlight that jumped and stung my eyes. Hiss, I forgot to draw the curtains. I drank last night, stole things, and even forgot to draw the curtains. My brain is still confused. But the next second, I felt like I was carrying a 1,000-pound weight on my back, and before I could recover from the weight, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my neck. The pheromones reacted before I did. The two smells collided violently in the air. I pushed the person on top of me, quickly fixed my collar, stepped aside, and shouted, "What are you doing?" My voice is a little hoarse. It's not a big deal, but the problem is that my breathing is unstable and I have to use all my strength to calm down. David was stunned for a moment, staring at me blankly, then got out of bed and turned his back. No. I was confused for a moment. "I'm sorry, brother. I didn't mean to hit you." It turns out that alphas are incompatible with each other, and even their own brothers are willing to bite them. However, hiss. I touched the back of my neck and it was bleeding. The brat was not very gentle when he bit me. Luckily, he didn't bite the gland. Otherwise, both of us will die here today. If I really lose control and have sex with him, I can only commit suicide to prove my guilt. The atmosphere was a bit tense. Looking at his back, I felt a surge of anger again. "Turn around." David did so. He had already obediently received the pheromones and suddenly asked me, "Brother, do you want my pheromones? It would have been better if you had said it earlier." I was just thinking of some excuse to get away with it when I heard David say with a hint of jealousy, "John is still doing that experiment? Asking you to collect my pheromones?" John is my childhood friend, a sweet and lovely omega, but he had the audacity to imprison alphas and use their pheromones for experiments. I followed the lead and pretended to be stern. "You are so disrespectful. You should call me John." David suddenly got excited. "Huh, what John? Why are you so protective of him, sister-in-law?" When David mentioned the word sister-in-law, he emphasized his tone and his eyes seemed to be spitting fire. His parents died early, and I almost raised him alone. He felt insecure and always felt that I would ignore him if I had an omega. But thanks to this reason, I have also turned down many blind dates over the years. Okay, stop talking nonsense. By the way, didn't you say you would only come back if I begged you? There was a lightness in my tone that I didn't even notice. Now that David is back, I feel relieved. Even if I touched those photos tens of millions of times, it wouldn't be as good as having him standing in front of me alive. David's face turned strange. "Brother, are you sure you didn't ask me for help? Why are you wearing my clothes?" David's words were confusing, but luckily I didn't really mean to ask. I'm glad that he's back. As for why I couldn't resist wearing his shirt last night, I'm not going to explain. It's all my money, so what's wrong with wearing some clothes? I was also happier when I went out for social events. My secretary would joke, "Finally you're laughing. A few days ago I was afraid I'd say something wrong and get fired by you." This is a complete false accusation. I'm not such a confused boss. He is just an older brother who is worried about his younger brother. He should understand me. There was a buzz of toasts in the box and the lights were dazzling. I had a few drinks with my partners and felt a little headache. But I didn't expect them to call anyone. A row of pitiful omegas, all of them were shy and timid, some even wore props like cat ears. Most of the people in the business world are alphas. At this moment, they don't care about their dignity anymore and just pick the ones they like and take them away. I didn't move. Someone teased, "Your clean style makes us look like bad people." Nonsense, what's the difference between you and animals in heat? But I remained stubborn and refused to move until I caught a glimpse of a pair of eyes. I looked into those clear, innocent and bright eyes, and then I saw a face that looked very much like David. His face was softer, because he was an omega, so naturally he didn't have David's fearless and unruly temperament. Now he was huddled in the corner, nervously and awkwardly waiting to be chosen. When a drunk man was about to grab his waist, I reached out and led him over. "I want him." The person who was cut off was not angry, but smiled and picked another one. Okay, you have good taste. "This one looks very tender." I took people to my restroom. They had to take a break because they drank too much. As soon as I lay down, the little omega came up to me and asked timidly, "How do you want to play?" There was worry, fear, and flattery in his eyes. I became increasingly upset. They have similar faces. How can there be such a big difference? Why must he be so humble? He is so humble that even if I mark him now, he will just enjoy it. They look the same, and he is obviously the omega who is naturally compatible with the alpha. Why do I think of another person when I look at this face? Go to the other bedroom and don't bother me. I have no urges or interests to label any omega. I just don't want to show this face to others and beg for mercy. Maybe because my tone was a little impatient, the little omega became even more scared and his body was shaking slightly. I sighed and accepted my fate. She wrapped him in a blanket to cover his nearly exposed body and said as gently as possible, "Don't be afraid, go to another room, okay? Don't worry, I won't let the higher-ups make things difficult for you." They were also hired by their employers and are essentially pitiful people. Just when I was thinking about asking who called me, I heard his crying voice. But David said that if I can't be marked by you tonight, he won't let me go." The little omega almost cried. I was stunned for a moment, and a key word came to my mind. David? Which David? I feel a little confused, and also have some inexplicable anticipation and irritation. David. With a snap, a string in my head suddenly broke. The only one who can make others so afraid that they call him David is that bastard in my family. But this was the person he had deliberately invited? What is he doing? No, the people here tonight were obviously not called by him. So what's going on with this Omega? It's a mess, everything is a mess. My thoughts were a mess, and David had tied a knot in my brain. How did he send that person here? Why did he send someone like this? An Omega who looks exactly like him. Could it be that he knows my dirty thoughts? I suddenly broke out in sweat and was completely stunned. Pheromones began to surge and run wild in the room, making it hard for the little Omega to breathe. She knelt at my feet with red eyes, revealing her slender, white neck. His pheromones also began to leak out slowly, as soft as he was, with a faint scent of toffee. It should be extremely sweet. He is like a plump and tempting fruit, waiting for me to pick it. My rationality is gradually disappearing, and what replaces it is not lust, but irritability and impulsiveness. The rage of wanting to throw people out, the urge to grab another person. Finally, I grabbed the kneeling Omega, pulled his body hard, walked to the door, and suppressed my anger. Go away. Don't worry about any retaliation. The Omega was trembling, but didn't dare to open the door. I had no choice but to open it myself. But I saw a familiar figure standing outside the door. A face similar to an Omega, but with a completely different temperament. The one that suits me best is David. David made way for the Omega and said in a gentle voice, "Let's go." The Omega then stumbled away. I felt inexplicably relieved. I don't know why, even though it was David who sent this person, I feel a little guilty at this moment. I spoke with difficulty. I don't have the habit of labeling others casually. It's definitely not for any other reason. You're being ridiculous. David laughed and asked, I'm kidding? Are you sure I'm kidding? Of course you are the one messing around. Could it be me? David suddenly frowned. Why is your pheromone smell so strong? Are you out of control? It was only later that I realized the whole house smelled of lemons. Sour and bitter. Just like how I feel about David. But David is standing right in front of me. I had lost all my rationality, and at that moment I thought, maybe I could be with him? Alphas being attracted to alphas is a disease. I have been terminally ill for a long time and there is no cure. I just want to hug the person in front of me and let him be filled with my scent. I thought so and did so. When I held David tightly in my arms, I could feel his heartbeat where our skin touched. David sighed inaudibly. You are really confused because of your illness. There was a sudden sharp pain in my arm, like the feeling of a needle being pushed into my skin. Then my consciousness collapsed and I fell into a deep sleep. I only remember falling into a warm embrace. When I woke up, I was in John's lab. The incandescent light gives me a headache. John, can't you just change the light? I've told you so many times not to save money for me. I was startled by my own hoarse voice and felt a tightness in my chest. John was mixing medicine nearby and said nonchalantly, Yes, I'll change it later. Of course I won't save you money. I've saved you so many times, I won't be polite to you. That's really the truth. John was the only one who knew that I was attracted to David. Sometimes David would stimulate me to the point where my pheromones went out of control, and I had to rely on John's medicine to control it. John thought I was a good research subject and always joked, It seems that you alphas are not invulnerable. But why am I here? I only remember taking an Omega to the room to rest, and then I felt a little irritable, and then what? John finally finished his work and laughed when he saw my distressed face. Hey, you lost your memory? He shook the reagent in his hand again and said to himself, No way my medicine can have this effect? Medicine? I suddenly remembered the stinging sensation on my arm and quickly lifted my sleeve to see that there was indeed a needle hole. What's going on? Why did David give me an injection? No, why would David send me here? Oh, your pheromones went out of control last night. It was serious this time. You started to have hallucinations and even called me David. In order to prevent others from finding out, I gave you some medicine and brought you back. You don't have to thank me, just pay more. I was a little slow to react, and it took me a while to digest his words. In the end, I felt a little disappointed because it turned out not to be David. Then he regained his senses and shook his head in self-mockery. Fortunately, it wasn't David. John couldn't stand seeing me like this anymore. Do you like it that much? If you like it, can't you just say it? You've been holding it in for so many years, it's been too hard. There was some reluctance in John's words. In the early years, medicines were not so perfect. Every time I lost control and woke up again, I would sit in front of David's photo for a long time. John saw it all. But I shook my head. No. I'm his brother, I can't hurt him. My parents died early, when I was 12 and David was only 6. I brought him up and he grew up to be David, a fearless man. He should live his whole life in this arrogant and carefree way. If I ever lose control, David will be in charge, and you can help me. John lost his temper and waved me away. Go, 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 don't delay my experiment. As I was about to leave, John's voice came from behind me. Scott, have you ever thought about what if David likes you too? I didn't answer. Because it's impossible. I know that David likes sweet and soft omegas, and I have helped him deal with many messes. But I didn't answer John. It would be too cruel for me to say the impossible words myself. The first thing I saw when I got home was David sitting upright on the sofa. This time it's the real David. Because when he was a kid, every time he made a mistake, he would pretend to be serious, but his eyes were rolling around, and it was obvious that he was up to something bad. He really made a big mistake this time. I looked gloomy, and David panicked and asked me, "Brother, how are you?" I didn't answer and turned to go upstairs. David followed me to the door happily. Countless good things were said during this period. Finally, I stopped him and said, "Don't bother me. Go to your study and reflect on your mistakes." David leaned against the door I was about to close. The flattering look on his face disappeared, replaced by grievance. "Brother, I was wrong." "What's wrong?" "If you don't want to reflect in the study, you can just do it in front of me. I shouldn't go racing with people. You shouldn't rely on pheromones to fight with others. I shouldn't have caused so much trouble for you, brother. Shouldn't." This is the first time I have seen someone reflect on himself and bring up past issues. He talked for a long time but didn't get to the point of last night. I was too lazy to listen, so I pushed his hand away and prepared to close the door. He almost shouted the last sentence from his throat. I shouldn't have given my brother an omega. 7. I feel angry and scared when I talk about this. But seeing David's fearless expression, my tone softened again. Don't do stupid things like this again. Even if I get married, I won't ignore you. David's face drooped. I quickly added, and I haven't had this thought in the past few years. Don't worry. I have figured it out. The reason why this bastard sent me an omega was simply because he wanted to arrange someone of his own by my side so that I wouldn't forget him after I had the omega. I am his brother. I can tolerate this mistake. As for the fact that she looks like him, it's just a way to attract my attention. It was difficult for him to come up with such an idea. But David's expression did not relax. Instead, it became more gloomy. Brother, you really don't have this plan? After receiving this answer, David left on his own initiative, but his expression was not very good. At night, I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about giving him something he would like to cheer him up. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't sleep. Even if the housekeeper brought some medicine to calm the nerves, it would be of no use. I had many dreams all night, all of which were bizarre fragments. I have never liked drinking, but I have repeatedly dreamed of having drinks with others. The game was also fancy. He would sprinkle salt on a person's collarbone, then stick it close to him and roll some into his lips and tongue, then take a sip of tequila, and finally cover the person's lips and swallow the lemon he was biting. The two flavors overlap, and the refreshing feeling explodes. Juice mixed flow. I couldn't help but sigh. But when I looked up, I saw the man's face, and it was David's. Suddenly woke up. It was already daybreak. I sat on the bed, unable to calm down for a long time. My burning hot body reminded me that I was really sick this time. I asked John to see a doctor, and when I learned that this was just overwork and had nothing to do with pheromone out of control, I breathed a sigh of relief. John was even more stern, scolding me. Even if you are an alpha, you still need to rest. You can't be made to do that. What's more, you have been taking drugs to suppress it for so many years, so you need to pay attention to proper relaxation. I thought about it and he was right. But what about the company? How can I not support such a big family business? David stood up at this time. Brother, I'll take care of the company's affairs. You should take a good rest first. David to deal with it? My first reaction was, isn't this just a joke? Then he noticed the overbearing scent of tequila in the air. I was surprised to find that David had grown up. The little kid who always asked his brother to hold him has grown into a giant who can protect me from wind and rain. Okay, do your best. The worst that can happen is that I can ask others for more help. It turned out that David was unexpectedly steady in his work. When I asked my secretary about David privately, even he couldn't help but praise him. I was completely relieved and no longer worried. Instead, I was thinking about how to celebrate David's birthday. I worked on 12 different plans overnight and took photos of them on David's desk. Pick one and see which one you like best. It's okay if you don't like these. Just tell me what you want to do and I'll do it for you. David didn't even raise his eyelids, brushed the plan aside, and spat out 2 words, no. How can this be possible? What David likes most is lively parties. Even though the friends he usually invites are all little bastards whom I don't like, David is genuinely happy about it, so it has to happen. I stretched out my hand to block the screen that he was looking at, and said forcefully, no, you've been too busy these past few days, you need to take some rest. I was thinking to myself that I should go back and take over. I was just sick, not dead, so why should my brother work so hard? David leaned back, crossed his arms, raised his eyebrows and asked me, I have a plan, don't worry about it. Although he looked so confident, I felt something was wrong. Thinking back to his good performance in the company recently, I suddenly realized that this was probably the feeling of being happy that my child had finally grown up. I casually praised him, you have done a good job recently. You are really great. Many people have praised you to me. David's lips curled slightly, I learned it from my brother. I laughed. Nonsense, when did I ever teach you this? In fact, it's not that I didn't let him learn. When he was 18 years old, I brought him into the company to train him. But he was a person who couldn't sit still, and being at an age where he loved excitement the most, he would go out and play all day long. I gave up this idea and accepted my life of hard work. But I soon figured it out. I'm his brother, and it's my duty to protect him from all the storms for the rest of his life. David should be the freest person in the world. But now David stared at me and said stubbornly, that's what I taught you. Okay, I taught you that. We have the same blood and are the same in nature. I have been influenced by it since I was a child, so I guess it can be said that I taught me. I was in a good mood. Since you have your own plan, then follow your plan. The night before David's birthday, he returned home early. I've been wondering what he's going to do. Why hasn't there been any news? Are we going to just find a random place to gather tomorrow? David went straight back to his room and came downstairs an hour later, fully dressed. The neckline is a little too open, revealing a piece of white collarbone. I stared at it for a few seconds and then looked away silently. David exclaimed in surprise, turned back, took out a clavicle chain and put it on, and said to me with satisfaction, I almost forgot about this. I'm ready, brother, let's go. He said mysteriously that he wanted to take me somewhere. Halfway through, I couldn't help myself and asked, do you want to go and see the arrangements for your birthday party tomorrow? I clearly agreed not to worry about him, but how can I not worry about him? He nodded, said, and said no more. No matter how I tried to ask him about it, he wouldn't say anything. I gave up and silently watched the night scene passing by outside the window. But this road is getting more and more familiar. David took me to the winding mountain road where I usually raced, stopped at the starting point, got out of the car, and knocked on the glass on my side. Brother, come down. Don't understand, but do it. The night wind is cold. David and I looked at each other, but neither of us said a word. There were some incomprehensible emotions in his eyes. If I continued watching, my pheromones would sneak out again, so I gave up and reached out to open the car door, Let's go back, it's too late. David grabbed my hand that was on the car door and said, "Brother, let's have a competition." There was a seriousness in his tone that I had never seen before. "What are you competing for?" I laughed. "Nonsense. I don't agree with you racing in the first place, and you still want to compete with me. Do you underestimate?" I avoided the question and felt inexplicably flustered. I always feel like David is going to say something, and I dare not think about it. But David interrupted me and said stubbornly, "Brother, let's have a competition." I was always reluctant to say no to him, so I just agreed, "Okay, let's compete. But don't underestimate me." I was also a car expert back then. As soon as the car started, I felt refreshed. When I was David's age, I also craved excitement and often drove late at night in secret, hiding my identity. As soon as I got on top, the car sped up to the horizon. The scene in front of me quickly receded, and my pleasure reached its peak. Suddenly I felt a little worried. David was sitting next to me. What if he couldn't adapt to driving so fast? Then I felt ridiculous for worrying so much. David had just broken the record on this route a few days ago, so why would he be afraid? Unfortunately, even if I relaxed for a few seconds, it would lead to my defeat. The final results came out and it was indeed not as good as before. Not to mention David, who is now in his prime. As soon as David sat in the driver's seat, he curled his lips and said, "Brother, you lose." Just like a little kid, he was so happy just to beat his brother. I agreed. "Well, I lost. What do you want to bet on?" "You'll find out in a moment." David started the engine with confidence, and the car flew out like an arrow. I was thinking, if he asks for something outrageous later, should I agree or not? The main reason is that I feel a little unsure about David tonight. I took a quick glance at him and saw that his expression was tense, even the muscles at the corners of his mouth were tense, and he seemed determined to win. So what is this treasure that he wants so desperately? But unexpectedly, David did not follow the prescribed route, but instead drove to a villa on the top of the mountain. The roar of the car cut through the sky and stopped abruptly at the door. David got out of the car, opened the passenger door for me, and said in a gentlemanly manner, "Brother, please get out of the car." "What is this kid up to? It's not a competition. Why did you bring me here? Did you buy it?" Driving to the door in the middle of the night to disturb others. If it wasn't his villa, I would have to go and apologize. But I have no idea when David bought this place. David nodded. "Don't you want to see the decorations for my birthday party? Can you come in and help me check it out?" This is business, and I readily agree. Before entering the door, David suddenly grabbed my wrist, his eyes burning. "Brother, do I win the game? Are you still thinking about this?" I nodded. "Well, I'm not as good as you." "That's good." For some reason, I always feel that there is something else behind David's gaze. The smell of his pheromones also wafted through the air. This kid, is he so excited about winning against me? He still can't change his bad habit of not being able to control his pheromones when he gets excited. I'll have to let John treat him later. But when I opened the door, I was stunned. What catches your eye is a wall full of photos. It's all me. There is me when I'm working, there is me when I'm taking a nap on the sofa, there is me when I'm talking to people. Some were dressed in suits and ties, while others wore loose t-shirts and had messy hair. Some were laughing heartily, some had blank expressions, and some had frowns on their brows. I just stayed where I was, silent. David suddenly put his hand on my shoulder and asked softly, "Brother, does my decoration look good?" Nonsense. My face got a little hot, and I belatedly retorted to David, "Stop it. It's not appropriate to put these on your birthday." My voice was trembling because I was scared. I was wondering where David got these photos from. I said firmly, "Take it down." David didn't take my order seriously. He gradually increased the strength of his hands, almost bringing me into his arms, and whispered in my ear, "But I think it looks good." David looked at the photos with an obsessed look and said to himself, "That photo shows me smiling when I just closed a big deal. I was so happy just looking at him. That picture shows that one of your subordinates messed up and made you angry. It hurts me to see it. Oh, and this is the picture where my brother was a little dazed after taking the inhibitor. Luckily John took the picture, Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see my silly and cute brother. David became more and more excited as he spoke. And this one, it's my brother. That's enough. I interrupted. What on earth do you want to say? Why did you bring me here for no reason and say these words to me for no reason? David's hand slowly moved down to his waist. Even through the clothes, you can feel the heat. David chuckled. Brother, why are you shaking? Don't you know clearly? What do I want? Heh. I want you. David suddenly lowered his head and bit the back of my neck hard. Ugh, you're crazy. I pushed David hard, but I only felt more brutal restraint. My pheromones were out of control and the air smelled like lemons. I tried to suppress him with pheromones, but was overwhelmed by his pheromones. Strong and unbridled, growing wildly. David licked the bitten part repeatedly, but after a while he felt unsatisfied and moved his lips little by little to my gland. It goes without saying that the place must be extremely popular now. David rubbed it twice and said in a hoarse voice, Brother, I want to bite. I pushed him away, my breath still unsteady. No. This is ridiculous. David, you are an alpha, you can't? Brother, aren't you an alpha too? David held my chin and forced me to look him in the eye. Brother, I like you too. Although we were only a few millimeters apart, our breaths were hot. That won't work either. David's eyes suddenly darkened. After a few seconds of silence, he hugged me gently. The smell of pheromones is not as overbearing as before, but has a more gentle flavor. I let him hold me in silence. After an unknown amount of time, David suddenly lowered his voice and said aggrievedly, But brother, I feel very uncomfortable. Besides, I won. He let me go, and I saw the disappointment in his eyes. He even had tears in his eyes, looking very pitiful. We are both alphas, and I can understand the pain he feels when he cannot get pleasure. In the end, he couldn't bear it anymore, so he sighed, opened his collar, turned around and exposed his glands. You bite it. If my own brother wants the moon in the sky, I will pick it for him. David didn't hesitate and bit it directly. The stimulation for a moment almost killed me. It hurts, it really hurts, as if hundreds of ants are gnawing at my heart. There is also some desire mixed in. The desires that had been suppressed by drugs in the past now seemed to be coming back with a vengeance. It roared violently and tore me to pieces. Brother, can I tag you? I smiled bitterly. It's no use. Alpha, how to mark alpha? Why am I not an omega? David was stubborn. How do you know if you don't try? He tried his best to inject pheromones, and the whole villa was filled with the overwhelming smell of tequila and lemon. We didn't stop until midnight, and I was already exhausted and lay in David's arms. Happy birthday, David. David released pheromones that helped me sleep well and kissed my forehead. Sweet dreams, bro. If you have this night, you will have sweet dreams for the rest of your life. Extra David's perspective. I am sick. I have feelings for my brother. When I realized this thought, I felt like the sky was falling, because my brother didn't look like someone who could be labeled by me. We are both alpha. No matter how badly I behave, I can't escape my brother's control. But I really like him, and every time I face him, I can't control the overflow of my pheromones. I suspect I like the lemon flavor. I bought a cartload of lemons, and they tasted only bitter. Unlike my brother, he smells good, fragrant, and attractive. Things get even more out of control when you're 18. My brother took me to the company and let me sit next to him to study every day. But brother, you smell so good. His mind wasn't on the documents and he couldn't help glancing towards my brother. I look more charming in a suit than usual. The longer I watched, the more uncomfortable I became. My glands were about to explode, and before the pheromones got out of control, I stood up and ran away without looking back. I don't like being here. I won't come again. My brother has always loved me, so it doesn't matter if I don't go. But as time went on, I felt uncomfortable because I couldn't see him all the time. I was upset and looked for pretty and well-behaved omegas, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get rid of the figure in my mind. That lemon scent seems to grow in my heart. I fell in love with late-night racing. When the speed reached the extreme, I could temporarily forget about my brother. But every time it's over, I always miss him more. So I did a stupid thing. I have installed surveillance cameras at home and in his office. My brother has never been on guard against me, so everything went smoothly. I thought about installing it in his bedroom at home, but I was afraid of being discovered, which would be troublesome. So I comforted myself. It doesn't matter, it's okay to watch less. But I didn't expect that I would see my brother on the surveillance camera in my own bedroom. I didn't expect that he would hold my shirt and sleep in my bed. I never expected that my brother would take off his clothes and put on mine when he was half asleep in the middle of the night. His lips were moving, probably he was talking in his sleep. I can't read lips, but he must be sleeping soundly. His usually serious face now looks indescribably calm. But I couldn't calm down. A few days ago, I threatened my brother so much that he begged me to go back. I regretted it the moment I opened my mouth, and now I wished I could grow wings and fly back. Fortunately, my brother was still there when I came back. I slept quietly next to him. But the night is quiet, and there is a faint scent of lemon around me. I couldn't help myself and bit my brother's neck. As a result, the person was woken up. I was panic-stricken and could only turn around, afraid that he would see the desire on my face. After I calmed down, he found a random excuse to get away with it. My brother joked that I responded without asking for anything. I laughed. "Brother, are you sure you didn't ask me for help?" But I saw in the surveillance video that my brother was so greedy for my pheromones. I'll just think of it as begging me. I went to find John. Because my brother said he is very powerful, I want to see him for treatment. John looked weird and hesitated to speak. After a long silence, he said, "What's wrong with you two?" I know about my brother's condition. It turns out that he is also attracted to me. I was happy, it turned out to be a similar tradition. But I started to feel anxious again because it seemed like my brother wouldn't be with me. John pushed a needle of reagent mercilessly and said coldly, "Control your pheromones and stop provoking your brother." I was a little confused. "Brother asked me to keep it a secret. Why did you tell me?" John muttered, "Because he's in real pain. In the early years, the medicine was not perfect, and he was in pain every time he was injected. And you are a bastard who relied on pheromones to compete with him. His condition worsened, and he had no choice but to increase the dosage." He showed me a photo of his brother staring blankly at the wall. John also had a sad look on his face. You can imagine how painful it was for him. "David, don't make your brother suffer so much." I did as he said and tried not to meet my brother. But after learning about his feelings, I began to wonder, does he really love me that much? I was bewildered and did something wrong. I found an omega similar to me and sent him to my brother's room. I knew my brother would take him away because he looks a lot like me. But when I really saw him bringing someone into the room, I couldn't help but feel jealous and anger arose in my heart. Why can I be with my brother just because I'm an omega? Brother is obviously mine. I rushed to the door, but when I got there I realized I didn't have the courage to knock. What will happen if I knock on the door? Let me chase them away? What will happen if I drive him away? I smiled bitterly, and then the door suddenly opened. I saw my brother and the omega who was crying sadly. My brother kicked the guy out. He frowned and said I was fooling around. But who is causing this overflowing lemon smell? My brother lost control and actually hugged me, burying his head in my neck affectionately. I dared not move. My brother is really sick and confused. For a moment, I wanted to hug him in, mark him and possess him over and over again. Even if it is in vain, it is better than a long night. Every time I miss him, I can only go to Panchon Villa and look at his photos to satisfy my desire. But I know my brother will be angry. Even if you want your brother, you can't do it when he is confused. I sighed, took out the medicine I carried with me, and injected it into my brother. He then carried the person to John in person. John was surprised. "Wow, you actually brought the person here intact. You are really a beast." "Actually, I don't want to, but what can we do?" My brother was lying on the hospital bed, his face was pale and his lips were bloodless. I suddenly wanted to expose this illicit relationship. I can't wait to be with my brother as a lover. I asked John, if I help my brother support the family, will he stop thinking so much? He has always been the one who protects me from the wind and rain. If I can also provide him with a roof over his head, will he feel more relaxed? Would you be willing to be with me? I proposed a crazy idea, and John shook his head. In the end, he still gave me the drug that can make people depressed and told me, don't take too much at a time. Like I said, you've never been on guard against me. I successfully entered the company and learned to handle official business like my brother. My brother praised me for doing a good job, and I said it was all because of my brother's good teaching. My brother said he never taught me. But only I know how fascinated I am by the way he plans and strategizes at work in the surveillance video. I have been working nonstop for half a month, and it seems like I am getting more relaxed. The night before my birthday, I decided to break the sky. I'm being shameless, please agree to one of my requests. Of course it's him. My brother can't stand seeing me sad, so as long as I show a little weakness, he will let me do whatever I want. Let me toss and turn, and have whatever I want. I tied his hands with a clavicle chain. Brother, I want to mark you. My brother said sullenly, it's no use. Alpha cannot be permanently marked by alpha. But I don't believe it. So the scent of tequila and lemon in the air lingered all night long. Even if the smell fades one day, I can just replenish it. Brother wished me a happy birthday. I asked him if he slept well. He said it was good. I laughed. Brother, I will let you have sweet dreams for the rest of your life.